Hello, I'm Adele Parks and I'm here today to talk to you about my latest novel, Just My Luck. I've had a few questions in from you guys specifically about Just My Luck, which is now out in paperback but has been out in hardback, so some of you have already read it, hence the questions. So I shall fire. I like this one because it starts with a compliment to me, which is lovely, let's be honest. Just My Luck was one of my favourite reads this year with such a great premise. Can't tell you much about the premise other than saying to you it's about a group of six friends who are in a lottery syndicate together until they have a fallout. And two of those couples, four friends, leave the syndicate. The two remaining friends, the one couple that are left, buy the ticket the very following week with exactly the same numbers, and the numbers come up and they win £18 million. Clearly, the four that have left the syndicate are furious and they go to extreme lengths, and when I say extreme, I mean extreme lengths, to get what they consider their share of the money. So that's the premise. So back to the question. Just My Luck was one of my favourite reads this year and such a great premise. I had an acute case of premise and envy. Without any spoilers, I didn't give you any. Can you advise if the last chapter existed from the first draft, or was it something that I developed at a later point? And that question comes from Bear Carroll. Well, Bear, I knew my ending, and yes, it's a twisty-turny ending, isn't it? There's lots of twists and turns in this book, and I hope, as I take my readers along with me, that some of the reveals, you'll kind of go, yeah, I got that one. And that's really satisfying, and I want you to feel that. But something does happen at the end that I think surprises most people. But absolutely from the very first line, I knew that was going to happen. You can't plot this type of book, which is, you know, I have multiple character viewpoints. There's many main characters. There's a couple of different homes, for instance, and people knowing some things and other people's not knowing the other things. And it's almost impossible to plot that kind of book if you don't know your ending. So yes, indeed, I did. And actually, I've had a very similar question from Joe Adlam, who said, have you ever started a book and then changed your mind about it and started over? And whilst that might seem a very different question, in some ways my answer is a little bit similar, because in fact, if you plot very carefully, you ought to know where you're going. That's my plan. But interestingly, with Just My Luck, and honestly, this book was just my luck. It's had its launch in lockdown. It's had all sorts of things have happened to it. But one of the things that did happen to it is that 50,000 words in writing it, I binned it. Yeah, I know, quite a difficult decision to make, but I binned it not because I lost faith in the plot or the storyline, but I realised that I had not accounted for one of these twists and turns and a particular viewpoint, and so I needed to introduce somebody else to have a different viewpoint. So one of my characters had to step up and have their own chapters rather than just be in the third person all the time. And that was super exciting. And I introduced a character called Emily. I mean, she was already in the book, but she was able to have her own voice, and she's a teenage girl. So it gave me a lot of fun because I had this sort of almost greedy, teenage millennial-y type character contrasting Lexi, who won the lottery money, who's rather worthy. So it was a lot of fun. So yes, I have started again. I actually pretty much recommend it. I mean, it was terrifying at the time, but good news, my editor, I guess, saved her, telling me to start again. Yes, so I hope that helped answer that question for you, Joe. Gemma Russell asked me, do I have a favourite author? I don't, Gemma. I love hundreds of authors and hundreds of different novels, and I read in different genres, and I'm relatively eclectic that way. Also, I know lots of authors. I have lots of personal friend authors, so it's almost impossible picking a favourite author, because I have so many friends that are brilliant authors and I like to read them. But I think what you want to hear is, who do I read myself? And so I would give a firm shout out to, at the moment, I would say I read anything that Lucy Foley writes, and I would read that in a hurry. Lisa Jewell, Jane Fallon, they've all been long-term favourites of mine, and I love their work, but I do have to confess they are also friends of mine, so I'm extremely biased. I'm also asked, Juliana Motta has asked, do I have the full plot in mind beforehand, or do things take a different turn along the writing process? Again, Juliana's probably got her answer to that, because I mentioned that I plot very heavily before I start, and it's as much of a surprise to me as it is to anyone else if I have to change anything in that plot. I wouldn't say I plot chapter by chapter. I would say that I know my beginning and I know my end, and I'm very character focused. So I'm very clear about which characters would do what sort of things. So I can't go wildly off plot, because I just think, oh, that's out of character, that wouldn't work. But I do have some surprises along the way. I sort of get to a point and I think, oh, this character's turning out to be very interesting. I think I might give them a little bit more space. I might give them a bit bigger voice. So it's not absolutely set as a hard and fast rule before I start, because that probably would bore me. But yeah, I kind of know where I'm going. And finally, another question of Joe Adlam. You've written a lot of books, Adele. I have written 20 novels in 20 years. Just My Luck was my 20th novel to come out this year, and as you've all noticed, it was a pretty tough year. So it's, you know, instead of being for me sort of the year that I celebrated this extremely exciting thing that I'd pulled off, the 20 novels in 20 years, and I was supposed to be touring in Canada, in South Africa, in America. That all got cancelled. I did, however, manage to tour in Australia, and I think we're now in the mindset of counting our blessings rather than counting what didn't happen. So, hey, this year I got to tour in Australia, so that's brilliant. And the other countries are still there. I will get to them at one point. So yes, I have written an awful lot of books. And Joe's point is, how do you find the ideas for your books? I never really know how to answer this one without sounding too glib, because my quick answer is I get my ideas from life, from listening into conversations that people are having, from reading newspapers, from overhearing conversations I'm not supposed to be listening into. That's a good one. But in this particular book, Just My Luck, it's really lovely, because I can tell you the exact moment I got the idea, which doesn't always happen. Sometimes you get sort of a theme or a character that comes to you and you start piecing it together. But I almost got this book fully formed in one afternoon. And I mentioned it was about a group of friends who do a lottery syndicate. I happened to had the great pleasure and privilege of having a friend, a very dear friend, who works in the lottery company. And when I was thinking of what would book 20 be, I met him and we were just chatting and catching up and talking about our work life. And he was telling me a little bit about the sort of care of duty that the lottery people have towards lottery winners. Because obviously, if you're a lottery winner, there is a reasonable chance that you're, you know, on a very ordinary income. You know, the people that play the lottery, they're people like us, aren't they? We all play the lottery. So, you know, we're not multimillionaires, but obviously if you win the lottery, you're suddenly catapulted into a world where you might have the kind of wealth that footballers or rock stars have, etc. But of course, you haven't earned that gradually, and you haven't built that wealth along with your peers. So it's a shock to a lot of people. And that was the premise of my novel, when he started talking about the sort of duty of care and how they advise people and put them in touch with financial advisors and that sort of thing. And very casually, just as a sort of throwaway comment, he said, and if it's a really huge win, of course, we ask them about security. And I thought, wow, that's interesting. Can you imagine in the moment that you hear, oh, all your dreams have come true, you've won this a huge amount of money because you've played the lottery and you've won the money, but suddenly you have to start thinking about security. And for example, your children, are they at kidnap risk? Is your house secure because you might be broken into? And I realized at that point that whilst money answers an awful lot of problems, and all of us dream about it, don't we, winning the lottery and answering all our problems and paying off the mortgage and all that kind of thing, it clearly comes with a whole new set of problems. And I thought, there's the idea. So thanks for taking the time to send in those questions. I hope I've given you full answers that have made you curious about my book, and perhaps you'll go and have a read of it yourselves.